Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. This is one of my most anticipated films of 2014. So did it disappoint or did I enjoy it? Well, just to give you a little brief summary about who they are, basically Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is based on one of their existing comic books, although the comic book has actually changed quite a lot throughout the years. So this film is actually based on more of the kind of the modern versions. They had completely different characters when it first started for the most part. So this is kind of based on the more recent sort of comic books, and it's really set to be Marvel's riskiest sort of property yet, because this is really not known by sort of general audiences and even sort of comic book fans. You know, a lot of them aren't too familiar with this property, so it's not a particularly popular book if we're talking about the comics. Now, Marvel have done a good job marketing this film to really sort of sell it to sort of non-fans, I would say, really sort of playing up the humour. Of course, you've got Chris Pratt here, who plays Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, who is essentially the lead of this sort of ragtag group, and he plays Star-Lord. He's an Earth lad who is taken off his planet as a young boy, as we see in the kind of the prologue, and there he becomes kind of like almost like a cross between Han Solo and Indiana Jones, a bit of a pirate, a bit of an explorer, and he obtains an artifact which we could have, I won't go too much about what it is, but if you're a fan you're probably already know that. And through a few circumstances he ends up in prison and meets a variety of other characters who know. Obviously you've got Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, who is the adopted daughter of Thanos. You've got Rocket Raccoon and Groot, who are CGI characters voiced by Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel, and Drax the Destroyer, who is played by David Bautista. And they kind of have this kind of they're at odds initially, and they have, through common sort of bond, they form this kind of ragtag sort of team almost, and then through, I guess, the fact that they're all kind of outsiders, they have that sort of thread in common and kind of band together to defeat Ronan the Accuser, who is the kind of the bad guy for this movie, and his kind of cohort Nebula, who is also a adopted daughter of Thanos. So that's pretty much all I'll say about the plot. I don't want to spoil it for you because it's opening day today as I've seen it, so I won't go too much into the plot, but let's talk about what was good and what wasn't. So first of all, the good. I would say this film is a damn good time at the movies. This is a fun movie. Now, a lot of criticism has been levelled at some of the Marvel films for kind of the way they portray their humour. And if I take the Thor movies as the prime example here, some of the humour in that film, especially from the Kat Dennings character, really was forced. And unfortunately, it didn't work in certain aspects. There was some jokes that hit the mark. This one, I think, is constantly. They're near enough all hit, I would say. So the humour in this film is very good. It fits with the tone. It's a really fun movie. I mean, there was people sort of laughing out loud in the cinema, which in the UK, if unless you're seeing an actual comedy, is relatively rare. I have to be honest. I know it's a different experience in places like America, but in the UK, people are generally just quiet. So, but people were laughing out loud in this movie, which is probably a pretty good sign. And I found it genuinely funny movie as well. The chemistry between all the characters, I think, is great. Even the actual CGI characters as well. I think they really made them a kind of lovable characters almost, and very expressive. And I think especially in regards to say Rocket and Groot, they're a great double act. And really, even though Groot only says 3 words, he still is able to kind of emote, and that's really some kind of achievement, to be quite honest. So, even though the story isn't particularly original, it's a fun story. There's lots of action. There's lots of sort of dogfights and things like that. Lots of sort of fighting, one-on-one fighting as well. So it's a fun time to be had at the movies. Now, if I had to have some criticisms, I have a few. Now, one of the main criticisms of this film that other reviewers have said, that I actually disagree with here, was that Ronan was a poor villain. Because you had Thanos kind of behind the scenes, he almost didn't seem like a threat. I disagree with that. I have to be honest. I actually thought Ronan the Accuser was quite a good villain and did seem like a genuine threat, and I was actually quite happy with him, to be quite honest. His motivations aren't particularly clear. I don't think they did a good job of that, and that's one of the issues I have with some of the other characters as well. But he did seem like a genuine threat. What he actually does in the movie, okay, he might be a bit one note, to be fair, but I actually thought what happens in regards to the plot and what his actual plan is was pretty damn good and pretty exciting, and you did feel kind of a genuine sort of sense of tension. So I would say I disagree with that particular criticism that I've seen on a few other sort of channels and things like that. In regards to Thanos, yes, we do see him I was a little bit disappointed with Thanos, to be honest. Now, here's a problem that I have. The same people who are going to say, because Thanos is in, you know he's there, and that makes kind of Ronan the Accuser not quite as menacing, you're going to say the same things with the Avengers Age of Ultron, aren't you? And pretty much any film, until they sort of face Thanos, we know this is the big bad that's coming, so pretty much anyone else is really just a starter until we get to Thanos, who's going to be the main course. But Thanos, I don't think he was particularly well realised, I have to be honest. In my own personal opinion, I didn't think the CGI was all that great. We get a good look at him. He's not in the film loads, but we get a good look at him. He looked a little bit too CGI for me. And we've got Josh Brolin doing the voice, and I just didn't think it fit. I quite like Josh Brolin as an actor, but hearing him voice Thanos, I think it should have been someone like with a really incredibly deep voice. If you've seen the Underworld series, the guy called Race, who's actually one of the writers of that film, he's in a voice like that, someone who's like really kind of deep and gravelly, almost a bit like Vin Diesel, I suppose. But I didn't like Thanos that much. Yeah, he's a great character, and he's going to be interesting. I'll enjoy watching him when we eventually sort of see him in a proper film. But I was a tad disappointed. On the subject of CGI as well. If you've watched, say, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, yeah, and you compare sort of Caesar compared to places people like Rocket and Groot. Unfortunately, I don't think Rocket and Groot quite stand out as well as Caesar does, and maybe that's the problem with seeing Dawn of the Planet of the Apes just before Guardians, is that I couldn't help but compare. And whilst the CGI isn't bad, it's noticeably CGI. Whilst with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, you kind of just forget about it, if that makes sense. But with here, even though I think the characters are good, you still can tell that it is kind of like CGI, and you are aware of it. For example, the fur on Rocket, if you're looking at it for the fur on Caesar, it just looks a lot more CGI than it does in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The other thing I had maybe an issue with, and this is the criticism I have seen, is some of the acting. Specifically, Dave Bautista, some of his acting ability, certainly the first half of the movie, is quite poor. The way he delivers lines, his lines are actually quite funny. The dialogue is good, but the delivery of it is kind of just a little bit poor at some points. And also Karen Gillan as well, who plays Nebula, also not the best actress. I know that she's got a fan through Doctor Who and everything, but she maybe not bad, but she kind of stood out compared to the other sort of performers, to be honest. And the two of them, whilst they weren't terrible, and as I say, Dave Bautista was probably the weaker at the two of them. And not every line was bad, but there are certain lines where he does a very, very stilted. And his character's meant to be this guy, who takes everything literally and can't understand certain types of humour and things like that. And I understand that. But just his line delivery was kind of just a little bit off and a little bit sort of unsure, and the kind of the same thing with Karen Gillan as well. I think she, not quite as up to scratch as the other actors who just seem so kind of sure in their roles. I mean, Chris Pratt, who plays Star-Lord, nails it, absolutely nails it, owns the role, really makes you root for him, and he gets that fine balance between being cocky but not annoying. But kind of that likeable. So he really hits the sort of nail on the head. And I really like Zoe Saldana, who plays pretty much the straight woman as well. I thought they were very good. So that's my kind of criticism. Yes, again, the story is not the most original, but it was a serviceable story. But it is a fun time at movies. It may sound like I'm kind of picking on this film a lot, but I went into this with very, very high expectations. And I do think it could have done it with a little bit more work. Some of the kind of the backstories we sort of told, it just comes across as a little bit convoluted sometimes. So we told a lot of exposition. Basically, we told pretty much Gamora's backstory, Drax's backstory, pretty much everyone. We sort of just told an exposition about what sort of happened. So it almost felt like this could have been either a longer film or maybe sort of split over two films and kind of beefed up a little bit, because you just feel you're told a lot of stuff rather than kind of seeing it. And I guess part of the problem is the fact that you have all these kind of characters who we haven't seen in their singular movies like the Avengers, and because you compare it, I guess, to the Avengers, you can't help but kind of feel a little bit shortchanged. But I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's a fresh rating if you were looking at Rotten Tomatoes, so don't try that to a negative review. It isn't a negative review. I do think it could have been a little bit better. But I did really enjoy this movie. So 7.5. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop watching now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some spoilers. So there is 2 post-credit scenes. One of them is almost immediately after. It's just kind of really a fun little scene. So because the main post-credit scene is, you do see a cameo of Howard the Duck. So he does exist in this universe, and again, he's just a kind of a CGI sort of creation. So look out! I knew he was in the movie, but I thought maybe I missed it until I sort of got to the end credits. The other thing is Benicio del Toro is the collector in here. He's barely in this film, which I was quite pleased with. I didn't really like the way they kind of made him look. So he's in this film a lot less than I thought he would be, and Yondu, played by Mark Rocco, is in this film a lot more than I thought he would be. So I was actually quite happy with that, to be quite honest. I actually quite like the character of Yondu, but I wasn't so keen on the collector. Collector's near enough a cameo, to be quite honest. And when you see him, there is, you have a look around and you kind of see a couple of Easter eggs. You see like a dark elf and things like that. There are certain nods to, the other sort of Marvel characters. Cosmo is in there, for example. It's a decent film. This film, go check it out. I'm probably going to see it again on the cinema, I would say. Little bit disappointed with Thanos, I got to be honest, which I wasn't expecting, and I'd be really interested to hear your guys' thoughts if what you thought of him. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who do love him, and I understand that, but for me, he just fell a little bit short of what I was expecting. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about it. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.